It's the 1st of Spooktober, and that means in the United Kingdom it is Black History Month, which is on equal footing with LGBT Pride Month, or whatever the hell they call it here, for being the most annoying month of the year. As I'm sure most of you know, Black History Month revolves around the fact that for most of this month, the news cycle will include somewhere something interesting about history or a modern day black person and give us useless news on it. It seems to be nothing more than a virtue signal for all the corporations, all the media outlets, and, of course, all the political parties. So I'm going to be going through some of the highlights of the virtue signalling from around the UK. First, let's see how the Labour Party are introducing Black History Month.
I'll say it again, Black history is British history.
Oh, well, that's a good start. For those that don't know, this is Marcia de Cordova. Yes, I know, it's a very British name. She was born in Bristol, and she is Labour MP for Battersea. And what she just said is wrong. Black history is not British history. White history isn't even British history. British history is British history. My problem here is that she is putting racialised groups and applying them to cultures and nationalities, which I do not believe is the case. But she is also implying that black history has had a huge impact on the whole of British history, which isn't really the case, given that we only really had mass immigration of, well, non-Brits into Britain post Tony Blair getting into office, which was in the 90s. And of course we had Windrush and all that, but that was nowhere near the amount of immigration that we have seen over the past few decades. So to start off a video saying black history is British history, that's left a rather sour taste in my mouth already, but let's see where they go from here.
I think black history should be part of the curriculum.
Yes, part-time Richard Spencer decoy, Keir Starmer, of course you want black history to be part of British history curriculum, because you want to virtue signal your tits off.
Because I think it's really important for young people to learn and understand in a balanced way about Britain's past and how our modern society came to be shaped and formed.
We don't even do that now with our own proper history. Barely anyone who hasn't watched Blackadder could tell you who George III was. Barely anyone can name a Prime Minister before Tony Blair, apart from Margaret Thatcher because they all hate her. And barely anyone understands any history about the Empire, apart from the fact that we were part of the slave trade. Most people in the UK don't even understand how we came to abolish the slave trade. So maybe we should start focusing on teaching that part of history well first, before you add on these months in which black history is taught. And you know, why not Indian history? Why not Sikh history? Why is it only black history that seems to matter when it comes to racialised history?
I don't think it should be just 1 month. It should be a proper part of the curriculum.
The curriculum is broken, and your way by fixing the curriculum is to add in a load of critical race theory history into it. This is going to ruin kids' understanding of history. All there is to teach about black history is the last 30 years plus the Windrush generation. How is that supposed to expand people's knowledge of how Britain came to be formed? Apart from explaining why you barely see any black people in footage of Victorian times.
Marcus Garvey has a famous quote saying, "A man that doesn't know his history or his culture is like a tree with no roots."
He sounds like a smart guy, and that's exactly why I do my own reading into history. Because all I learned from history at school were the Tudors and the World Wars.
And I'll also say we had the Macpherson report 20 years ago that also made reference to having a culturally diverse curriculum to help prevent racism.
Well, Labour, you keep bringing up that hate crime is constantly on the rise, despite the fact that over the past 20 years we have been diversifying the curriculum. So by this correlation, and I've seen Labour bring up weaker correlations, we can say that diversifying the curriculum actually makes more racists. Though of course my actual opinion is that the rise in hate crimes is due to the fact that the definition of a hate crime has been lowered to literally calling someone gay on the street. But hey, these people mess around with statistics, so why can't I?
I'm really lucky to live in and represent a constituency with a rich culture of black history.
You are MP for a constituency that has a rich culture of black history. I don't really understand what he means by that, because usually when people talk about a rich culture, they mean tradition. And this is another problem I have. When he says black history, he does mean black tradition. What does he mean by black tradition? Because the traditions of Jamaica and, let's say, Somalia are going to be completely different to each other. This whole racialization of history really bothers me, because there is absolutely no details, and it tells you nothing other than the skin colour of someone. I don't know what people mean by white history and black history, apart from mainly they're talking about the history of Europe and Africa. But again, these continents, when you get to the national level, have rich and completely different histories, so trying to racialise it doesn't quite work.
And I want my kids to know about that.
Well, then teach them yourself. It doesn't mean as Prime Minister you have to force every single kid going to a state school to learn about black history. Again, depending on what that even means. I don't even know what you mean by black history outside of Windrush and the last 30 years.
I want all communities to feel that they're part of that and reflected in that history.
Now, don't get me wrong, I can understand why immigration would make a part of history. But really, when you are emigrating somewhere and you plan to stay there for the long term, I think it's really up to you and your family to learn about the history of that place. And you to try and integrate within that nation, not the other way round, which seems to be what this is all about. I mean, again, I'd have to see the details of this black history curriculum, but from the sounds of it, all they're going to talk about is how black people came over. And, you know, what's the point in learning that? I mean, in that sense, I've pretty much taught what's already going to be in that curriculum from what we know about it already. So I've just had a look at the next segment. Just goes ahead and proves my point that all they are talking about is Britain since the Windrush.
Looking at the politicians that have gone before me, that have paved the way for me, people like Paul Boateng, Diane Abbott, who was the first black woman to be elected to the British Parliament, and then others like David Lammy.
So the black people from history she's talking about that inspire her are all living black MPs. This doesn't bode well for wanting to teach history.
The black Britain that I admire most is Doreen Lawrence, my friend Doreen Lawrence.
There we go. Apparently the only inspiring black Britons are MPs according to MPs. This is ridiculous.
I think the first step really is acknowledging that action needs to be taken.
Oh, bloody hell.
This should be an inclusive exercise, looking at how we can improve diversity and reflection in everything that we teach.
See, this is why I think all education and curriculums need to be privatised. And it's also why whenever I have kids, I'm probably going to make plans to homeschool them. Because I don't know what the hell they're going to put in this curriculum. But what I do know is that it's going to be full of critical race bullshit. And I do know that every kid in the UK who goes to either a state school or a public school, which in the UK means private, that they will have to learn from this curriculum. And it will include all this critical race bullshit. Now, I would be happy to leave it up to choice of curriculum and school so that you can pick and choose which curriculum your kid gets depending which school they go to. That'd be perfectly fine, but no, this is going to be on a national level. Honestly, thank God the Tories are starting to kick out anti-capitalist teaching in schools, because next thing they need to do is kick out all this critical theory nonsense. But hey, one thing at a time, lads.
Because it's so important that our curriculum is truly reflective of our history. And that is why we need to have a review of the curriculum to ensure that black history is taught as part of British history.
Still have no idea what they mean by British history outside of Windrush and the last 30 years. Details, man, details.
That has to be a stepping stone, because ultimately the goal has to be, as we've set out, the eradication of structural racism in our society, and that will be a defining cause for the next Labour government.
So anyone who's planning to vote Labour in next election to own the cons, please have a rethink about what that's going to do to your country and the history curriculum. And honestly, what is the through line from teaching black history, again whatever the hell that is, to then eradicating structural racism in the UK? This is what I mean at the beginning when I said it's just a chance for everyone to virtue signal. They've said nothing in this promotional video. They have said absolutely nothing. And all this was an exercise to say, look what we're doing for you, Black Britain. When really, when you get into the meat and potatoes of it, it's absolutely nothing at all. It's a lesson or two on what the Windrush was. And that'll be it. Anyway, enough of Labour. Let's see what the Prime Minister has to say about the lovely month of October.
All this month, we're celebrating the lives of black public servants who helped make the UK what it is.
Black History Month's just about the public servants? What the fuck? I thought it was about black British history. That goes way beyond just the public servants who happen to be black. This is coming from someone who doesn't even want Black History Month to be a thing. We're only celebrating the public servants. Are you mental?
There are servicemen from the UK and Commonwealth who fought for and with Britain to defend democracy.
Already Boris Johnson's curriculum's sounding better than Labour's, I have to say. Boris Johnson then goes through a couple of examples of people from 20th century history who were prominent black people, such as the first black female head teacher, to, I suppose, give appreciation to them on this month in particular. Though again, I wouldn't call these examples prominent, they are more akin to factoids. But then, of course, he has to give credit to our NHS.
And of course, there are the thousands of black nurses who came to the UK to staff the fledgling NHS.
Why we aren't skilling up our own nurses is beyond me. Also, the 300,000 people a year coming over who can use the NHS, which, by the way, they used to have to pay for. Yeah, it might have something to do with that we need the masses and masses of immigrant nurses to help out our fledgling NHS.
And we see their legacy today in people like the 2019 Nurse of the Year, Tara Matari.
Well done to her for winning Nurse of the Year. But again, this seems like a very modern sense of the word history. We are literally talking about last year.
Sadly, many of these individuals have not been recognised for their incredible contribution to this country.
What do you mean? Tara won Nurse of the Year last year?
And far from receiving the respect and gratitude they deserved, many black soldiers, like George, were actively shunned.
I mean, for those of you that know World War I history, you will know that every soldier faced discrimination after World War I. And yes, George did face racial discrimination back in the days of post-World War I Britain. And George has 2 plaques in his name, one where he lived in Southwark, and the other at the fire station he worked at during World War II. The man is clearly been receiving the gratitude he deserved. Yes, it was a bit late, but it just shows how as a society we have become more tolerant. But of course, for critical race theorists, it is never enough. Hence we see the Labour going in the direction they're going. But anyway, carry on, Mr. Prime Minister.
So this Black History Month, let's say thank you to figures from our past we haven't always thanked before.
It's like a bloody whipping ceremony, isn't it? But as shown from the plaques to George Arthur Roberts, there has clearly been a huge change in the way we treat minorities in Britain. In fact, there is good argument to say that maybe we are treating them far too well at the expense of the natives of the land. Whereas it is my opinion that everyone should be equal under the law anyway, and treated in the same way regardless of the colour of their skin, etc. But no, I'm sure that it's specifically black people we should thank this month in particular. You know, it's not like there are white people in history who have been forgotten. When was the last time anyone thanked Horatio Nelson for stopping the French at Trafalgar? When's the last time anyone thanked Lord Wellington for stopping Napoleon at Waterloo? And these are pretty big examples, but basically no millennial or Zoomer really knows who these people are. It was only through my own research, really, where I learned about Horatio Nelson and Lord Wellington. And these are 2 people who, without, Britain may still not exist as we know it today. Now, of course, white as a racial group didn't face discrimination in Britain, but, you know, England has always not had a fond taste of the Irish, whom were also discriminated against in Britain. Yet we have moved past that, and yet for some reason we don't have an Irish History Month. So my question, as it has been every year, is why only Black History Month? Please tell me why.
And let's also reflect on where we are today. Whilst we have come a long way, and Britain is one of the most diverse and inclusive societies in the world.
More virtue signalling that is absolutely pointless.
The events over the last few months have shown that there is still much more work to be done.
Oh, like what, Boris? For God's sake, man. The mostly peaceful protests, which ended up with more officers being injured than the violent ones that happened the week after, show that clearly when we do have a more progressive society, it seems to mean that once again we have a rule for one racial group and another for the other racial groups. Just because it goes in the opposite direction to how it used to doesn't mean it's a good thing. For God's sake, grow a backbone, man. Stop virtue signalling to these nutters and start acting like a conservative that your party says you are.
All too often, we forget that black history and British history are one and the same.
What do you mean by this?
And if we forget that, then we're left with a partial understanding not only of our past, but also of our present.
Oh my god, he's just going into the same arguments as Labour. This is what we voted for to keep Labour out. We've basically got what Labour was about 10 years ago. This is ridiculous.
It makes it harder for young black people to root themselves and their experiences in our national life.
Yes, I agree it's difficult for immigrants to integrate. I do agree that it is difficult. That doesn't mean it's impossible. I don't think bending over backwards and having an entire month for one racial group to have the dick of their history sucked dry is going to help them. It's going to give them the idea that we will bend over backwards for anything for them, which will embolden them to ask for much more. And I don't even mean the racial group, I just mean the critical race theorists. There are plenty of black people, such as Morgan Freeman, who hate the idea of having a whole month dedicated to a racial history.
And that's among the reasons why I've established the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities to examine where inequality exists across our society and to set out a positive agenda for change. Black history is our history. So let's learn from it and build a better future for us all.
He's a socialist. He's literally, that is socialist thinking. We're looking at inequalities. Inequalities of outcome, that means. That is not going to mean they are going to look for genuine bigotry and racism that is actually palpable and can be recorded down solidly in a report. They're going to go on median incomes and a load of other stats that they are going to say, hey, look at these stats. Oh, look, hate crimes are going up. Therefore, we're a racist country. It's ridiculous. And then he's going to put forward positive change to reduce the inequalities. Socialist. He's just a bloody socialist. Oh, God, I've had enough of our PM. Let's see what Sadiq Khan's doing. This is great. The Royal Mail is honouring Black Britons by painting postboxes across the UK, including Brixton. He's painted... You've painted... Thank God, guys, we've done it. We've ended racism by painting red post boxes, because, you know, those red post boxes, very racist, very white supremacist, but they're black now. Racism's over. It's amazing. I can't believe it. It turns out we don't have to change the curriculum. Turns out painting a post box, solved racism. Absolutely love it. I mean, if this all that Black History Month was, I wouldn't mind too much, but it's not. Sadiq Khan probably well, it's his party, so he must support what Keir Starmer plans with the black curriculum. And that is really the most dangerous part, because all that's doing is injecting critical race theory in, which, if you don't know, is an incredibly racist theory in and of itself, as it makes far too many assumptions that your race dictates your culture, which I think they are fairly separate. Anyway, I think the First Minister of Wales, who I think only the Welsh really care who that is, had something else to say on Black History Month.
Black history is Welsh history and Welsh history is black history.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
In normal times, people from all backgrounds would come together to kick off a full month of activities that recognise both the historic and present-day significance of black history.
Yes, that's significant 0.6% of the Welsh population.
And in doing so, the value and contributions of BAME communities here in Wales.
Right here is the Wikipedia entry for black Welsh people. There are literally 3 people that are considered significant black Welsh people. And one of them is Shirley Bassey. It's just... How you have a month to cover these 3 people is ridiculous. That's literally 10 days each. I don't even think there's 10 days worth of things to say about Shirley Bassey.
But coronavirus will not put a stop to everything. Race Council Cymru has made the decision to move from Black History Month to Black History Wales.
Well, I suppose you don't need a full month to show the significance of 3 Welsh people. You know what, this might be a good idea. Let's see what it is.
A full year of activity which will be known as Black History Cymru 365.
Are you off your rocker? A whole year of Welsh black history. You know, I'm putting it up on a screen again. They have to spread out this, a 2-minute read if that, into a whole year of activities, all for 0.6% of the Welsh population. Are you out of your mind? You are going to need a lot of people who can waffle on to cover a whole year's worth of activities to cover Black Welsh history. You are out of your mind.
As a government and as your First Minister, I am proud to support all of this.
Of course you support it all. If you said you didn't support this, you'd be called a racist.
We will continue to celebrate the presence and contribution of our BAME communities all year round.
BAME people are not black people. They are any minority in the UK. You are a fucking idiot. How is Black History Year going to help people from Asian descent, from Polish descent, from anyone that isn't British descent? You're an absolute spanner. These people don't know what they're talking about half the time. They just say things that sound good so they get good boy points from the bloody leftists that are all over government and social media. Anyway, the rest of that video is just a load more virtue signalling that I really can't be bothered going through, because at this point, I think my head is going to die, and I mean, if my head's going to die, then I doubt any of my audience is going to want any more either. So there you go, that's how Black History Month was launched by the politicians of the UK. Obviously, I would go into Nicola Sturgeon, but she is currently telling all the Scots that they are not allowed to leave their house. Thank you, coronavirus. So that's about everything I've got to show you. So as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.